Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we celebrate Myositis Awareness Month, honoring people with myositis, their friends, and their loved ones. We are also celebrating the 27th anniversary of the HSS Myositis Support Group, which would not be possible without your continued support and the support of hospital leadership, the rheumatology division of HSS, and the support of my colleagues in the Department of Social Work Programs. We have a full program today, so I'll be brief and introduce today's speaker, Dr. Reji Mathew, who will be presenting on the topic of neuroaesthetics, an expressive arts-based approach to access calm, well-being, and daily restoration for chronic conditions. Dr. Reji Mathew is an award-winning neuroscience-informed intermodal and expressive arts educator. Dr. Mathew is a clinical instructor at New York University, board member of the Rockland Conservatory of Music, and International Expressive Arts Therapy Association. She is an arts reporter for disastershock.com, an arts accessibility advocate for anti-racist art teachers. The mission of her work is to teach about the power of cultivating inner artistry as a tool to face the challenges of daily life and explore the expressive arts as a path toward healing, discovery, and integrating the mind, body, spirit, and imagination. A few housekeeping items. For approximately the first 45 minutes, participants will be able to view the presentation, but your image will not appear on screen and you will be muted. This is to protect your privacy. Once the presentation is finished, excuse me. So once the presentation is finished, access to both audio and visual will be available. Dr. Mathew will lead us through a series of interactive exercises. As I mentioned in an earlier email, you should have with you at least 2 different colored pens or markers and paper for the drawing portion of the exercises. During this time, you will also have the opportunity to ask questions. Dr. Mathew, thank you.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be here to also honor the anniversary of this support group and the incredible advocacy at Hospital for Special Surgery's Department of Social Work. So I'm going to begin my presentation. My presentation today is Neuroaesthetics, an expressive arts-based approach to access calm, well-being, and daily restoration. As Susan indicated, I'm an expressive arts educator and psychotherapist. I'm also a mental health educator. I have an active life in expressive arts advocacy with multiple organizations. And I'm also a person living with a disability and a long-term condition. So what I want to say is I know firsthand the challenges of managing a health condition. And through the arts, I have found a powerful path of integrating the mind, body, spirit, and imagination. Before we begin our talk today, I want to first talk about the ethics, safety, and best practices of expressive arts therapies. This talk is not a talk about expressive arts therapy. I want to first note that there is an ethics to each therapeutic practice. So the organizations are the American Drama Therapy Association, Dance Therapy Association, Music Therapy, Art Therapy, and International Expressive Arts Therapy. If you are currently under treatment of a mental health condition, it's important that if you want to incorporate the arts into your mental health treatment approach, that it's done with the guidance and supervision of a licensed, trained mental health clinician. And the reason for that is that we all have different sensory sensitivities. We have sensory preferences, and we all, depending on where our condition is, what stage of the condition we're in, have different adaptation needs. So each organization has detailed protocols and measures and evaluation tools to guide people into the right expressive artistic choices that would enhance their well-being and reach whatever is the clinical target or therapeutic aim. And also, most expressive arts practitioners work with an integrative team. So I want to first establish this, that if you are currently under treatment of a mental health condition, the recommendation is to work with a licensed professional. But for today's talk, what I want to do is to introduce you to the whole world of expressive arts and health research, so you can be informed to bring this modality into the conversation with your health practitioners. Many of the resources and links that I'll be sharing today will be sent to you as a follow-up, so please don't feel overwhelmed. You will have links and access to all of the modalities and organizations that I referenced today. So first, let's define what is the expressive arts and how does it impact health. So I'm going to pull from a few different paradigms and how these different paradigms talk about the expressive arts. First, from the International Expressive Arts Association, the expressive arts is the creative practice of various mediums, which includes visual arts, music, dance, drama, writing, and other forms of artistic expression to facilitate personal, emotional, and imaginative exploration to help people communicate, process, and reflect on their feelings. The idea is that through the act of creation, we can explore our inner world, foster self-awareness, and that in the expressive arts, the emphasis is on the process of creation for growth and not outcome. Another paradigm is the field of anthropology, and how they talk about the world of expressive arts. And this is a quote from an iconic dancer, Gabrielle Roth. And she said, in many shamanic societies, if you came to a medicine person complaining of being disheartened, dispirited, or depressed, they would ask one of four questions. When did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? When did you stop being enchanted by stories? Another way of explaining this from an anthropological perspective comes from Dr. Kathy Malchiati, who says that in every culture across the globe, we have practices of movement, we have practices of sound, we have practices of storytelling, and we have practices of silence. What am I saying here is that since the beginning of time, humans have comforted themselves, made sense of their world, told their stories, regulated their minds and bodies through the arts. Now there's an emerging field called neuroaesthetics, and neuroaesthetics is the scientific study of the arts and how it impacts the mind and the body. These researchers from a website called NeuroBlueprints Art, the link is on my website, just published a book called Your Brain on Art, How the Arts Transform Us. And what the idea is in this book is that human beings are hardwired for aesthetic experiences, and the arts are essential to human well-being. So, for example, theater experiences can foster empathy and perspective taking. Nature can reduce stress and boost mood. Music can activate the relaxation response and bring us to the present moment. This current work and research is a culmination of close to over 10 years of research of understanding the impact of the arts on mind-body regulation. The last paradigm that I like to draw from is the world of positive psychology. And in positive psychology, there's a framework called the PERMA model of human flourishing, an evidence-based tested framework from the Center for Positive Psychology. And the idea is that what they've studied in this model is that we can look at arts from what's called a model of human flourishing. And what this means is that they've identified in this framework that there are certain ingredients that help people to be well and help humans to flourish. The first ingredient is the access to an experience that facilitates positive emotion on a daily basis. That means you don't wait for life to get better to feel better, that you have somewhere to go to lift your mood, to give you perspective, to be able to take a step back. The second principle is the principle of flow. What does that mean? We all need in our challenging, complex lives somewhere to go to take a break, to get a break from the demands of sometimes managing a full-time medical condition, which can feel like a full-time job. So in positive psychology, they talk about flow, states of flow. So art making, listening to music, playing music, studying choreography can activate what's called the flow state, where we immediately engage in the present moment, and it activates the relaxation response, renewing and restoring our central nervous system. The third element of human flourishing is that we heal in community. The long-standing principle across time of social and relational medicine, that the arts essentially are a communal activity, and that when we engage in art with other people, it provides us an opportunity to what's called co-regulate. Next, that the arts is also a language, and there are various languages that can be a tool to find meaning. And also the arts can help us re-engage with what's called self-efficacy, that when we're facing a medical crisis or a challenge, oftentimes we're facing a loss of some kind. And the arts can provide us a way of re-engagement, a sense of experiencing agency again when we may have lost some aspect of it. So the next idea I want to talk to you about is then what is the expressive arts and how does it impact health directly? The first thing I want to share with you is the expressive arts palette is broad. There's the visual arts, the movement arts, the performance art, the written arts, the symbolic arts, and also expressive arts that can serve as ritual, milestones, markers of our lives. So one of the first health benefits of the expressive arts is what Dr. Kathy Malachi talks about is the circle of capacity. That means that, let's take a look at this image here, is that when we lose or one pathway gets dampened or compromised, there are many other pathways. So if our movement system gets compromised, we still may have access to our visual system or our sound system or our imagination system. And some of the examples I'm going to show with you today are people who did exactly that. They may have lost connection to one pathway, but through the arts, they found another pathway to be a full embodied person. So it's called circle of capacity, that in the shadow of loss, what can we do? What do we have access to us? And in this first principle, it's the arts offers us what's called a whole brain approach to healing and restoration. The second health benefit of the arts is that it helps us to access many different parts of ourselves. Now, in the way that mental health is understood is that we think of the self as a multiplicitous self. So for example, I'm thinking of a musician that I worked with who would be a pianist, and because of progressive arthritis was no longer able to play the piano. And that felt like such a loss to this person. But when we looked at the idea of self-expansion, they said, music is my first language and it is my home. I may not be able to play music, but I can compose music. So then this person moved to a different relationship to music, which is compositions, splicing together old recordings of original works and composing it through current digital musical tools. So he moved from a direct musician to a composer. So the idea is that the arts helps us to access different parts of ourselves that may have been hidden, that we may not have had access to express, that it's not possible to experience and express every part of ourselves at every stage of our life, that every stage of life offers an opportunity to explore a different part of ourselves, like our inner poet, our inner artist, our inner musician, whatever our circumstances or the parameters of our mind and body allow. The next health benefit of the arts is that the arts offer what's called the reflective practice. A basic principle of the arts, expressive arts, is that every art form will lend you its eye and offer a new way to see. So what does this mean about a reflective practice? That when we experience loss or impingement or constriction, our perspective can narrow. So immediately engaging in the arts can broaden our perspective, can embody new perspectives. We hear a lot in our cultures the importance of daily meditation, some kind of meditative practice. So what the arts does is that it can either function as a daily meditative practice or a daily meditative activity. What I love about the aspect of the idea of a reflective practice is that when you reflect, just like you look at a mirror every morning, it's your way to check in on yourself. How am I doing? Where am I today? Where am I today compared to last week? So this is another amazing benefit of the arts, is that once you find the right expressive form that's good for you and that feels good, it also can be a reflective tool. The next health benefit of the expressive arts is mindfulness. Now, we hear this term mindfulness all the time. What does this mean? How I like to think of mindfulness is time orientation. There are 3 time zones that our minds can be in. We can be thinking about the past, we can be thinking about the future, or we can bring our attention to the present moment. Now, what happens when we're not in the present moment? I like to explain mindfulness through these 2 visuals. When we're not mindful, let's look at this. This is what the brain records, a blurred version of our life. But when we're mindful, that means even if today is imperfect, even if we had a rough morning, but we're suddenly noticing what's in front of us right here, right now. This is what the brain records. So we record the green, the red, the yellow, the sunny day, this beautiful butterfly that just suddenly landed right in front of us. Let's take a look at this. When we're not mindful, this is the version of what our brain records. But when we're mindful, we'll notice the blue, the red, the green. What's the point? There's a whole body of traumatology, trauma research, noting what's called all research, that one way to heal from a traumatic event is what they say is called training your eyes to see beauty. That means every day when you notice something, the present moment, no matter how mundane it becomes, what you're doing is you're allowing your brain to record that moment. And then once you record it, it becomes a resource. Another way of saying it is when you're not mindful, all you will have is a blurred version of your life. You won't remember last Wednesday, 3 weeks ago, 1 month. So do you only want a blurred version or a blurred recording of your life? Or would you rather record a version of your life that means, wow, I had some rough news from my doctor this week, but it was a beautiful sunny day on the way there. On the way back, I had a really soothing meal with my daughter. Yeah, that savory toast with that beautiful sort of handmade jam was so soothing. So this is why it's important to be mindful, because along the way, in the complexity and adversity of our life, there may be moments of ease, moments of calm, moments of rest, moments of restoration that we can build into our mindful library. So we are constantly going back when we need it, on a day that we can't even get out of the house because it's a hard day. It's a day of fatigue. We can tap into that inner resource of calm, restoration. We can find our way back out of a relapse because we have a kinesthetic recording of our life. The next principle of the arts is that the expressive arts provides language. And sometimes we know that when we go through difficult experiences in life, there really aren't the words. The words itself really can't capture what's lost. Words can't really capture our fears, our worries of the future. So the expressive language can be a tool to find the words sometimes. Other times, an expressive activity can be a bridge to words. Other times, an expressive activity could be an alternative to words. What's the idea? The idea is express it to address it. The next benefit of the expressive arts is the expressive arts innately, because of sensory new sensory experiences can, if it's the right type, activate what's called the relaxation response. So let's think of this as the brain. The brain is always looking for what's called sensory inputs. So if we're feeding it like calm, soothing, joy, pleasure, it's constantly, it's like our brain is like a Wi-Fi signal. It's looking for signs of calm. It's looking for signs of restoration. So with the expressive arts, we can schedule our day in a way that we have sort of quiet music, meditative music in the morning, an afternoon of sketching, in the evening, some movement to sound. At the end of the day, reading a poem that helps us get into an imaginative place, that we can go through the day and set up the day in a way where we live what's called an aesthetic lifestyle. The other benefit of the expressive arts is that it helps with imagination. And when I mean imagination, I mean an accessible imagination. Yeah, when we face adversity, the one thing I hear people say aloud is, now what? What do I do? And the arts can help us slowly build what's called a new imagining. The next idea is social and relational medicine, that the arts helps us to discover ourselves in community. That when we connect with each other through the arts, we can calm each other, ground each other. Oftentimes when I'm working with different chronic condition communities, sometimes I will process and talk with people about, wow, caregiving and meeting these needs and communicating health needs over the course of the way burns everyone out. At the end of the day, could you do some sketching together? That means take a break from that particular narrative thread and step into something else where you can encounter and be with one another in a pleasurable, safe, and joyful way. The last principle I want to say about mental health is that mental health is a practice. And this is really important. So if I said to you, I'm going to exercise today and I'm done for life, does anything work that way? If I let go of exercise for a few days, oh, it really affects my mental health. So what we want to do is build a practice that we can go through on a daily basis that anchors us, regulates us, directs our attention to hope, brings the temperature down. And our practice needs to constantly change and evolve as our conditions change and evolve, as the world changes and evolves. So I often talk with people about what works in the winter may not work in the summer. What works in the spring may be different in the fall. So we're in a constant dialogue to say, is my practice serving my well-being in the here and now and today? So let's go through the mindset that's required to enter into the expressive arts. And I'm presenting this today as an integrating it as a part of a holistic plan of health. The first principle in the mindset that we need is the idea of therapeutic play. Let's take a good look at this picture. Humans learn in the first 5 years of life how to live simply through play. And in the expressive arts, it's called play work, and play work is very serious. But somewhere around 5 or 6, we stop playing. We stop learning about the world through imagination. Now, children are serious about play. They don't think of outcomes. They simply discover and imagine and just let themselves be in the present moment. So thinking about a return to this type of learning, non-linear, non-sequential learning to find your way through life's quandaries. The second principle is a mindset principle is that in the expressive arts, it's expression, not outcome. We look at, this is not an approach where we're busy interpreting, oh, what does this mean? We're more interested in the experience of art making. That both examples here, one from a famous artist and one from a child, are both valid. They're simply expression, they're choices, they're both artists. The next principle is the principle of a discovery. So let's look at this print here. Saw this on Pinterest, which is a social media platform. Nailed it. Now here is a visual depiction of a sun, maybe done by a more serious adult artist, a graphic designer. And here's a version of a child. But the child said, nailed it, right? So children don't judge. They simply create, discover, wonder. And there's a joy and a wonder in the discovery. And sometimes that's so hard to peel back because we're used to measuring, evaluating, and grading our work. And this is a really another important principle to really discover the possibilities that the arts can offer. The next mindset principle is that the arts provide metaphor. It gives us what's called aesthetic distance. What is the definition of metaphor? To carry across. So you can say, like, I want to feel, this is a print that I worked, I'm free as a bird, right? So you can then study a bird. How does a bird move through the world? Where can I access that kind of freedom again? So through metaphorical distance, we can explore things that may be difficult to explore in linear language. Next, the expressive arts also offers what's called a multisensory dialogue, that we can look at one particular theme in a myriad of ways. And that's an important training about the expressive arts to say, wow, how am I going to get from point A to point B? Once I notice people develop artistic training for daily life, they say, well, maybe there's another way. Maybe there's another way. Let me try this. That innate creativity starts getting activated, and then it becomes a resource. So now I'd like to move to what's called expressive arts modalities and exploring it. So I'm going to invite all of you to take a blank piece of paper, and at the top of the page, if you can write noticings. So first, what we're going to do is what's called receptive expressive arts. Then we're going to do off-camera active expressive arts. So as receptive is simply noticing it, watching the arts, observing the arts, not physically engaging with it in any way. The research shows that both have significant benefits, both noticing art, but also engaging in art. So let's talk about aesthetic noticing, receptive versus active. So for art, when we do art, we can notice shape, scope, medium. When we're listening to music, we can look at tone, cadence, pacing. When we're looking at drama, we can look at story, plot line, theme. When we're looking at poetry, we can look at imagination, imagery. When we look at dance, we could look at mind, body, and flow. What am I saying here? How can you build an aesthetic lifestyle of well-being? So here's my model of well-being. I try to dance at least 7 days a week, for a half an hour with the Dance for PD community. I do 1 percussion exercise daily. I'll do 1 sketch a week. I try to focus on 1 form of narrative drama per month. And then I do daily journaling. That means it's called intermodal processing. That means I'm constantly trying to process my experience of living in my body, being a human being, and being in the world in an intermodal way through movement, words, visual work, drama, and sound. That each one of these different ways of processing the world offers perspective, but also feed each other, also communicates with each other, and keeps and sustains my hope. Because I know firsthand what the challenges are to say, wow, this is what's on my plate. How am I going to get from point A to point B? And when you're having a hard day, how are you going to get from the office to the kitchen? How are you going to have the stamina to cook today, right? But through all constantly being in a creative mindset helps you to approach the daily ADL tasks with a sense of ingenuity and creativity. So what does this mean? So when you're stuck, you can say, can I think of an image right now? Or when you feel like you can't move through a task and feels difficult, does that remind you of a song and the pacing of a song? Or do you remember a story that can serve as an archetype? Or where do you notice or feel that in your body? So let's look at some of the modalities and how it could be of help to us. The first is dance. Dance movement is a very powerful modality. It first is a form of exercise. It can promote physical health, self-awareness and insight in the body, and cognitive clarity and mind-body connection. My work is primarily in the Dance for PD community, where there's 42 peer-reviewed studies on the impact of dance on PD. And the whole thesis of this approach is to think like a dancer. What does that mean? It means that in your day, as you move through the world, if there's mobility challenge, to leverage imagery and imagination in service of movement. To learn choreography as a way to how to repattern your sense of movement. And then also using musical rhythmic cueing as a roadmap to move through the day. So let's take a moment and look at an example of how this works in this community. And if you look at my website, you'll see links to this community, and people in this community, they're fully able-bodied, they're in chairs, they're seated, they may have access to one or two limbs, or sometimes they're not able to engage in any movement, but they're just there for what's called the receptive experience of watching movement and gaining the benefits of it. So let's take a look.
It's one of those situations where everybody's in the same boat.
Class member Joy Esterberg has had Parkinson's for 7 years, but this class has given her something new.
It's given me a community that you don't have that in New York for the most part. This community is like being in a small town.
And contracting everything in.
My impression is that many people with Parkinson's feel like they're outside of the human experience, and dance is a huge part of the human experience. And so to come in and dance, you're human again.
I want to welcome anybody who's new.
At a meeting before the class begins, the cardinal symptoms of Parkinson's are often apparent. A hand that shakes, muscles that stiffen.
Opening to the sides.
But when class starts, symptoms often seem to slip away.
Take a big dive forward and arc with your hands.
Class member Reji Butts.
And forward.
When the dance class is going on, there are no patients. The dancers.
And forward.
It's a phenomenon that neurologist Dr. Claire Henchcliffe finds striking.
And forward.
It's fascinating to see people who may have walked in slowly and sat down slowly and stood up slowly, and then when the music comes on, they really just get going.
Side, side, side. Hey!
But it's not just the music and motion that's helpful. With Parkinson's, everyday actions like stepping and reaching take greater focus and concentration, which is exactly what dance demands.
Feel the volume of the hat as you go forward and weight of it.
You have to learn complex series of steps, for example.
I'm starting out with my palms facing me, and I'm going to rotate my hand so my palm is now facing down.
There are pauses, there are turns, there are points where you go backwards, there are points where you mirror what your partner is doing. It has the physical component, but I think it also has the cognitive component.
In dance class, the mind and the body are constantly working together. You know, dancing is the ultimate mind-body connection. And open.
I'm going to stop there. So I want you to do our first assignment is go to your page of noticing and write down a noticing. What did you notice in learning about this community and the use of dance? Just an observation. So what I want to encourage you is that in the expressive arts, dance offers what's called intermodal movement. And there's nothing more amazing with wherever you are in your journey with your body to find a form of movement that feels satisfying. So I want to encourage you that there's a whole world of possibility in the world of dance and movement therapy where you can make that mind-body connection in where your body is now. The next area let's take a look at is the benefit of art. Art is a modality that helps us to express ourselves, fosters insight, also helps with stress reduction and stress and relaxation, and also can help in terms of cognitive and narrative benefits. With art making, there are many, the mediums are limitless: drawing, sketching, doodling, clay, soul collage, mandalas. The key is that you want to find a methodology or art making form that's accessible to you, that's non-stressful, enjoyable, and pleasurable. What does art making do? Art making facilitates problem solving, because as we're engaging with the medium and finding our way through it and doing many, many different versions of it. Let's say it's painting. Today, if your painting is your medium, what color will I use? What texture? What angle? So the constant daily exercise of solving the problems in art making is an incredible inner reference to notice. So let's take a look at another example of a artist that I will be featuring, who I will be interviewing later this year. The artist's name is Mary Dignan, and this is a deafblind artist who became a mosaic artist. So what we're going to do is hear this artist talk about what art making did for them in terms of restoring their mind, their body, and their imagination.
It's one of the most wonderful things ever. I want someone to look at my mosaics and go, oh man, that is just one of the most wonderful things I've ever seen.
Intricate mosaics of a lion, flowers, and trees made of broken glass in boisterous colors.
I don't want them to go, oh, these are pretty good for a blind lady.
Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired.
I'm Mary Dignan, and I am a mosaic artist from Sacramento, California. I've always loved mosaic art. When I was working on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., one of my favorite getaway things to do was to walk over to the old Library of Congress and look at all the beautiful mosaics.
In her studio, surrounded by colorful supplies.
I was born deaf. My parents had to fight the system to get me mainstreamed into school. This is 1959. There's no Americans with Disabilities Act.
Breaking pieces of seafoam glass.
I struggled in the beginning, but I caught up. I graduated in the top half of my class.
Using her fingers to puzzle the pieces together.
I was 20 years old and a junior at Santa Clara University. I was told I had retinitis pigmentosa.
Mixing red grout.
All I knew was I didn't hear all that well, and I was doing just fine. I figured, okay, fine, I'll deal with it. I think in a way, learning how to adapt to the deafness has made it easier to adapt to the blindness.
Spreading grout on a colorful mosaic.
The real story behind every mosaic is that something was found. Stained glass, ceramic tile, broken flower pots, dishes, ball chain, petrified wood. Working with things that are broken. You take what you have and you go with the flow and you let it transform into something else.
Carefully filling in the cracks between pieces.
After my brain tumor surgery, I was completely shattered. I went from being a water and public agency attorney, environmental attorney, to a disabled person. As I picked up the pieces of my life and put myself back together, I learned through the mosaic process that what I was putting back together was pretty good. If I were not dealing with deafblindness, brain tumor, wackoness, and everything else, who knows what I'd be doing? I really don't know that I'd be any happier than I am now. I don't care if I can't see any of it. I'm determined to have a good time anyway. I'm determined to have a good life anyway.
So Mary is one of the two artists that I'll be interviewing for anti-racist art teachers, and just incredible stories of two people, and Mary Dignan and Moses Hamilton, two artists with who faced unexpected, complex challenges with their health, and how finding an art medium helped them restore their sense of place in the world, offered meaning, gave daily pleasure, fostered a sense of self-efficacy and agency. And now these are both people who are working artists and contributing their art to the world. The next area of the expressive arts is drama. And I particularly have an interest in what's called cinema therapy. And the two organizations I want to recommend to you, again, they're linked on my website, called Story Corps and Project Unlonely. What does cinema do? Cinema offers us the ability to see ourselves, to see possibilities of what it means to be a person, helps us through character to be able to imagine new plot lines, new narrative outcomes. So both organizations are a powerful collection of films and short stories that helps us to reimagine our place in the world. So I'd like to share a very brief interview with Dr. Jeremy Noble, who's a poet and a primary care doctor at Harvard Medical School, who is the founder of Project Unlonely, talk about the importance of art and community. Identity range defies stigma and preconceived notions on the subject of loneliness, that at every stage of life, we are renegotiating connection in what I would call an attached life, and that is not an easy task. So what's gripping to me is that this project really has taken a lifespan perspective on loneliness, that at every stage of life, we're contending with this challenge, this dilemma, and also this invitation to reattach. Can you say something about the commitment to the lifespan perspective? Because that is something that I found absolutely gripping about this collection.
It would be a pleasure. So loneliness walks alongside of us through the entire lifespan. And first, it might be useful to talk a little bit about what loneliness is so that you can see how integrated it is to every aspect of the lifespan. So, classically, social psychologists define loneliness as the gap between, totally subjective. It's the gap between the social connections we aspire to, desire, and want to have, and the ones we actually experience. Unlike isolation, which is objective, the number of people you're around. So in loneliness, this gap actually, can be quite painful. And so we experience that pain that often leads to a sense of, hey, we did something wrong, we're at fault, and so on. And so the guilt and shame that often accompanies loneliness becomes part of the challenge of navigating it because we think it's our fault. Mm. And so we deliberately kind of try to look at not only loneliness across the lifespan, but different types of loneliness. Mm. One of the things that many people who work alongside with us and engage with our programming find very helpful is the simple recognition that just like there are different kinds of love, there are different kinds of loneliness. Mm. There's love of country, there's erotic love, there's romantic love, love your neighbor. They're not all the same. Mm-hmm. And with loneliness, there are three types that we find very useful. And this comes back to your lifespan because you'll see that you navigate them in different ways at different age. The first type of loneliness is psychological loneliness. This is what most people think of. Where's my friend? Where's someone to tell my troubles to? Where's someone who's got my back? Most of the scales and measures out there that measure loneliness measure this type of loneliness. Mm-hmm. But there are two other kinds that we have to navigate also. The second one really is a societal kind of, am I included or excluded? Am I in or out? The way I often talk about this is to say, imagine a room full of people and you're thinking about entering that room. Is your arrival anticipated, welcome, and safe? Mm. And if it is, you're going to have a different sense of going into that room. Mm. And many times we're forced to go into rooms, whether it's a school, a workplace, down the street. And so if it's a hostile environment, you're navigating that. And it's a very specific kind of loneliness. Mm-hmm. Taken to scale and made systemic, this is racism, mm-hmm. a systematic exclusion because of race. Mm-hmm. But it applies to other kinds of difference also, whether it's, gender, disability, new immigrant status, whatever it is, not being part of the conventional beauty narrative. Mm-hmm. So that's societal loneliness. The third type, and the one that I think in some ways may be most interesting and important to understand, you might call spiritual or existential loneliness. Mm-hmm. How am I connected to the universe? Mm-hmm. What was here before I arrived? Mm-hmm. What will be here after I depart? Mm-hmm. Does my life have meaning? Mm-hmm. Do I have consequence, or am I disposable? Mm-hmm. So as we share films that talk about everything from young adults trying to make sense of their social choices, mm-hmm. to older adults trying to make sense of the life they just lived, mm-hmm. you can see that these three types of loneliness appear in many of these films. In fact, some of the films have all three.
So I'm going to stop there. So if you can take a moment and write down your noticings about hearing the story of Mary Dignan engaging with art, and also hearing from Dr. Nobel and talking about the use of film for well-being. So if you can just take a moment and write on your page, what am I noticing? The next area of the expressive arts is music. And oh, there's not enough hours in the day to talk about music, because music is my anchor. In a nutshell, music is the sound of feelings, but also going deeper, music is also the sound of emotional intricacies. Music is a powerful tool to engage with well-being. You can cultivate playlists, identify songs that are anchors, identify songs that could help process feelings, developing a playlist of songs that help you to remember a relationship, time, or place, or engage in community making, or join a choral group. What's the idea here? There's a lot of research on what's called rhythmic attunement, that listening to music, we're listening to a beat, we're listening to a rhythm. And that rhythm of the right kind of music can help us slow down our breathing and our heart rate, lower cortisol level, calm chaotic feelings, thoughts, and feelings. Music therapy is a profession that's over 50 years now, is a powerful tool in treating and participating in the integrative health plan of mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, and chronic stress related to health management concerns. So let's just take a moment, mindful of, I'm going to just engage with all of you for a brief exercise of, let's take a moment and listen to what I want to invite you to do. Just take a deep breath, and let's just take a moment and just notice this piece of music, the tone, the ebb, the flow, the direction, the melody, the bass note. And just notice that this is a very gifted musician called Malte Martin. He is a handpan percussionist and a musician, and his music is very meditative, and he specializes in sound healing. So I want to invite you to take a deep breath, and we'll just listen to this for about 30 seconds. I want you to notice the effect of this music on you, and it's okay if it doesn't resonate. Thank you, everyone. I want you to just take a moment and notice that. Write down your noticings. What did you notice in receptively engaging with music by simply listening? And the last area is writing and poetry. What does writing and poetry do? That writing and poetry helps us to reflect. And there are many ways that we can engage with it. Free verse, writing to prompts. There's something called morning pages, which is a very common practice, spoken word poetry. Poetry is also rhythmic. It evokes imagination. So poetry is also essentially intermodal. I'm mindful of our time now, and we're going to transition into our portion of active expressive arts therapy to now have the experience of engaging with it directly with art making. So I thank you for being here for the first half of our presentation and exploring the comprehensive mind, body, spirit, imagination benefits of the expressive arts.